As this is a long process, this is one of the longest process of the sword, I believe. Aside from the printing. It's not even that it takes long, it's just a bit repetitive with the back and forth sanding non-stop. And when you're ready, also do the edge as well. Just make sure this is flat, so make sure it's a nice 90-degree angle. Also, if you're wondering, if you start seeing this kind of pattern, this is the pattern of the infill. So for example, I have a line going here, 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 underneath the plastic. This is just to keep the structure of the blade in place. This is being sanded more and revealing the plastic underneath, because that is where the infill is going, and it's actually keeping the structure of the sword opposing each other, opposing each side, whilst this area is quite hollow. So it's flexing in as I'm sanding and not getting hit by the sandpaper as much. if you're not able to get into another segment, just move around in your work environment. Just rearrange it so it's comfortable for you to work with. I am very limited to how much work area I have actually, so it's not going to be very easy for me to adjust. Perhaps this. Yeah. For now. Finding a comfortable working position is actually a challenge in itself. So yeah, that's not very comfortable for me. Gonna change it how I want, I think. Add a bit more access this way. And I'm going to do the edge again. Again, keep in mind the transition line. Use it as a guide and do not go over it. This area doesn't need too much sanding. It's this area that we need to focus on actually. So for this area, since it's quite tight, the sanding block will not get in there, so instead I'm going to use a piece of sandpaper. So I'm just going to tear it off. Now I'm tearing it off so I can have a bit of a tighter access, and if you fold it in half, it will become a bit more rigid. So we could get into tighter crevices. Like so. Now, as I mentioned about the concave problem, you don't want to put too much pressure on the seam itself. You want to spread it out evenly and gently, because if we put too much pressure on the seam itself, we might make it concave. We don't want to do that, so we want to be rather careful here. At least spread it out. You see what I'm doing? I'm just spreading it out, not doing the seam here. Now that may cause a concave here, so instead I'm just going to spread it out all over. So I'm not working on one area alone. And feel it. I still feel the seam a bit. Feels much better. And I can move on to the next area like these. Yeah. Again, we're working close to the electronics. I've got some splatter here, so that's something to think about. If you get splatter on it, but you have it sealed, that should be okay. The plastic is pretty waterproof, but make sure everything is sealed, like at the bottom, these edges, you do not want to get water in them. That's on you. And what I'm doing here is I'm just doing the edge, just to give it a nice defined curve, not curve, a nice defined corner. because I want the seam to pop. Not too much, just a little bit. So this is very good. I can actually feel it quite a bit here. Now I'm using my fingers here rather than a block because it's such a tight area, it's hard to get to. I'm going to leave it with that. I'm going to fill it up with more putty and then we can work on that area a bit more later. Just putting the sandpaper up to the edge just to get the edge here. Whilst not going over it, so see it's like a guide, slides around it. Just going to move on to the block again. This is actually really good, this seam. Oh, actually some here. Feel with your fingers. This is a big workout, this whole process. I'm dripping with sweat. I'm finding it a bit difficult to get to this area, so I need to reorient it somehow. So I'm going to try like this. Gently, because this area is quite an overhang, this might be susceptible to breakage, so you need to be very careful. I do not recommend doing this the way I'm doing it, but I've got pretty good control of my hand. Besides, I've got a metal rod here. So, see if I can just move it slightly down. But yeah, I do need to work on this seam. So a good way to reinforce it is use your hand underneath it and just scratch it like that. Obviously be careful not to scratch your hands, but this is just the way I'm going to do it to support it. Okay, see, I done a little mistake here. So I was sanding on the seam, so which I advise you not to do. So that's something to think about. So be careful how you control the sandpaper block. But that seam is feeling rather nice now. I'm going to do a little bit more. Feel with your finger. is a bit more harder to control down the tip because the transition of the edge becomes finer, so it doesn't glide as well as it does on this edge because it's becoming thinner here, so it's quite hard to control here. So if you can't get it right on the line, just move it slightly down and then just use a thin piece of paper where you've got a bit more control, like that for example. That reaches the line pretty well. Yeah, see, you actually got the edge much nicer. There we go. That's good. So a bit more sanding on these seams because they're not seamless yet. We need to get rid of the seams. Don't expect to remove all the seams in one go because keep in mind we only did like 2 layers of putty and this is the first stage of sanding. We still got to go through maybe 2 more stages. So don't fixate on getting the first round. We're going to do another layer of putty after this is done. Another thing you may want to do is make sure you wear clothes that can get dirty, because look at me now. I got quite a lot of putty. My floor is all wet. So yeah, a bit of a mess. So now I just want to work on the seams of the guard. Not too much, it's very, very minor, but you still need to work on it, so just use a flat bit of sandpaper. And use your thumb as a guide, and use your thumb as a point of balance. Like that, again not too much pressure, like spread the pressure out so you use the flat part of your thumb, not like that, but majority of it. So again, we don't cause that concave problem that I mentioned. Very little bit on the ball. On the edge, inner edge. And the other side, same thing, from the guard area. This side actually needed a bit more work here. Look at that, there's quite a big gap. I'm not sure if that will need to be filled with JB Weld or just putty itself. You see, this is what I mean. With the putty, it really reveals all the faults in the print because it makes it all one color, so you can actually see any big problems easily and clearly. So that is a big seam still. Should be able to fill that with putty actually. It might not need the JB Weld. Again, I'm using just sandpaper in my fingers rather than on the block itself because it's a very tight space. So yeah, you just basically want to sand areas that you think are not very fine on areas that look pretty rough and need a bit more rounding, a bit more evening. Nearly there. Just going to work a bit on this area. So with sandpaper we can make it really thin like that and just get it into nice and get into this groove. Don't need too much here, it's pretty good as it is. And I think we're pretty much done with this. Ready for layer, ready for another layer of putty. Not ready, I need to actually clean it and then dry it, of course. So, I'm going to do the other way around because of just a point of reference. Even though I haven't got electronics inside, just to show you an example that you should add all the points down so you don't get the electronics wet. If your bucket has a lot of putty, you might want to change it for some clear water. I'm just going to do first a few soaks like that. Then I'm going to change the water and do another rinse. See all that? That's putty colour. So with fresh water.